What's going on, everyone? In today's episode, I'm thrilled to be joined by the head of the WNBF Canada Federation, Leo King. Leo is the kind of person who you wonder just how do they do it all? He's an elite level pro natural bodybuilder who's placed top 5 at the WNBF Worlds competition multiple times. He's the owner and founder of several gyms called King's Fitness, which has recently just expanded to a brand new location. Plus, he is an online physique coach where he works with both natural bodybuilding competitors as well as lifestyle clients. And in addition to that, as initially mentioned, he's the head of the WNBF Canada Federation. He is the show promoter for multiple competitions, and he is a judge at multiple shows. Leo really does it all. In our conversation, Leo shares all about his journey and experience as a top-level pro natural bodybuilder. He shares about what the process was like of initially opening his first gym. And he shares about the growth of the WNBF Canada shows, as well as some of his thoughts on growing the popularity of natural bodybuilding in general. For anyone watching who's either a current or prospective natural bodybuilding competitor, you're going to want to watch till the end of the video as Leo shares the details on how the judges critique and score natural bodybuilding competitors when they are on stage. Before we dive in, if you enjoyed the video, please consider hitting the like button, leaving a comment, and subscribing. It does a lot to help the growth of this channel. This was an absolutely incredible episode, and I know you're going to love it. So, without further ado, let's get into it. To set the stage for our conversation, a little bit of your background is you're a pro natural bodybuilder, a very successful one at that. I know that you've placed top 5 at Worlds at least twice, I think. I know that you've come second. That was in 2021, 4th or 5th in 2024, 5th, so last year. In addition to that, you are the owner of King Fitness, a gym which has just expanded to another location. In addition to that, you also work as a coach. You coach lifestyle clients and prep competitors, so natural bodybuilding competitors. And then in addition to that, you work pretty in depth as a show promoter, judge, and someone who helps out in general. I know that from my experience competing in the WNBF, like you're running around backstage, whether that be helping people run the show smoothly, or you work as a judge, you're doing the promoting itself. But you work very in depth with the WNBF. So you're very involved with natural bodybuilding at pretty much the highest level. I have questions that I'd love to explore that kind of cover all of those categories. I think the place that I'd love to start with would be with your personal natural bodybuilding story. Now, from what I've learned about you, you became a pro at a relatively young age. You have an incredible physique. I'm going to make sure to show at least one snapshot of the kind of physique that you bring to stage, but you have an incredible physique. You became a pro when you were, I believe, 22 years old, which for bodybuilding is quite young. So my question is, for those wondering, including myself, upon being so successful, if that's what we classify as success in natural bodybuilding, did you expect to get your pro status at such a young age? Was that your first season? Was that your first competition? Or what did that
Yeah,
look like in the early stages of Leo's
sure.
career?
Yeah. So I started competing when I was 21 years old, and it was kind of like I loved the gym. I was going since I was 14. So I'd already had 6, 7 years of training experience before I even made up that decision of what was I training towards. I grew up, competitive athlete in mostly soccer, but played all the British sports, rugby, cricket, and all of the above. And I was just a super, super active kid. But kind of around that sort of 16 age, I enjoyed the gym, started going more, started diving into the details, learning more about programming and all of that sort of stuff. And then I moved to Canada when I was 19, and kind of that sports career kind of petered out a little bit, kind of got a little bored of it, what have you. But I always had that passion for the physique side. I've always been super fascinated by how we can change and mold our bodies, especially naturally, right? Drugs never even crossed my mind, to be honest with you. So I was like, okay, I was doing all this training. What I'm a competitive person, what should I put it towards? So for me, the logical choice was bodybuilding. And so I went to watch a show with a friend, and it was exactly 12 months before the show that I had picked out. And it was it wasn't with the INBF, WNBF. It was another Canadian organization, and it was great, well known. It was drug tested. I was drug tested. I ended up winning the novice division as a lightweight category, won the overall in the novice division. Um, and then some things happened. I met some people and just loved the WNBF. And this was back in the day where there was only maybe 10 affiliates and stuff like that. But I went to compete at the local level, and when I just turned 22 at this point, won the open division, missed out on the open overall by one point, which is tough to stomach. But at the same time, it was, in my opinion, it was probably how it should have gone. And then I came back the next season. So now over 2 seasons, third competition, won the overall, won my pro card, went on to the World Championships that year, which was in Atlantic City. And I ended up placing seventh or ninth or something like that in the lightweight division, but up against some massive names, Brian Whitaker of the days and stuff like that. And this was 2012. So this was now, what, 13 years ago or so, 14 years ago, give or take. So, and I've been, fully invested in the sport ever since, and I just love it. So
Upon winning, I guess a lot of people when they're competing, they initially have this goal of winning pro status, and that's the extent of where the goal kind of ends. It's like
Mhm.
I'm gonna win the pro status, and then a lot of people stop competing after that point. So I
Mhm.
guess my question would be, were you initially like chasing pro status? Was that the main goal, or what did you want to accomplish in general? And then after winning the pro status, like what were your next set of goals after that point?
So this is a great question, right? Because my I'm not very externally motivated, right? Driven. I've always just, to this day, it's just about bettering my physique and doing my best, right? So leaving no stone unturned, but also at the same time, doing it while having fun. So yes, I wanted to win, absolutely 100%. And the pro card was, going to allow me to compete at the highest level. However, for me, it wasn't about the pro card. It was more about competing at the highest level and being my best self. And that's always been the driving factor, honestly. And it's gotten a lot better even since those days. Even as recently as last year, where and we can go through the whole history and stuff like that. But being able to compete fully internationally in Europe and at the World Championships and placing top five, and truly probably the best bodybuilding, pro championships ever, right? So it was an incredible experience.
It's interesting how like you have this level of very high level of success, having come top five at worlds multiple times, and that you're not extrinsically driven, like you're not chasing a medal per se, or a placing per se, just this level of self betterment. I think there's got to be.
Mhm.
I don't think it's a coincidence that it's like you're very internally driven, and that's probably been a part of what's led you to be successful. This kind of internal drive for growth, I suppose. What do you attribute? Do you think to not just your early success, having won pro status on, I think your third show, but
Mhm.
also the top five wins the past 5 or 6 years or so? What would you personally attribute to your level of success?
Uh, it's probably just being consistent and sticking with it over time, right? Like it's 15 or now 20 years of training under my belt at least, right? So, you know, especially naturally, like people expect to grow, put on all this muscle and build the best physique that they can within such a short period of time now, and not sort of really looking at the playing field that's out there, right? Like, look at some of the greats who are still competing, right? And they're 20 years in, 30 years in of active competitions, right? So I think it's a lot of it is just you is sticking with it, but to stick with it, you have to enjoy it, and you have to come from this internal sense of drive. Otherwise, like you said, we see it all the time. If someone who's so only focused on that win or that pro card or whatever that is for them, they get it, and then what happens? You don't hear about them again, right? So that it definitely has to come from a different place, and I'd say, especially on the natural side of things, where we're literally trying to eke out ounces of muscle over the course of a competitive season, right? Like it's minute gains now, but we can always improve on other things, right? So now it's focusing more on posing and presentation and everything else that actually goes into bodybuilding, not just training and dieting, because it's a whole sport, right?
Yeah. Well, something that I've noticed, this is really interesting. Something that I've noticed is like some of the individuals that I've worked with, there's a level of frustration at times when trying to improve our physiques naturally. And I think a level of that frustration comes from social media. We see maybe enhanced athletes that have
Mhm.
incredible physiques that accomplish a huge transformation relatively quickly. And again, even that's not super common, but it happens. Or we see social media and we see a physique that's, taken 10 years to develop, but we only get that snapshot. We don't see all the work that goes into it. And I think it leads a lot of people to develop unrealistic expectations as to what the playing field is. As you noted, it's like this is a
Mhm.
natural game. We have, we become more advanced and maybe we're only building a few hundred grams of muscle per year. And that's a huge win. But that's the playing field that we're on as natural athletes. And I think that's where there's a level of frustration for some people is an unreal having an unrealistic expectation that
Mhm.
maybe they should be building muscle faster, they should be looking differently than they do. So I guess my question is for you, did you always like were you always kind of level-headed as far as that goes? Had it ever bothered you that, "Hey, like, I'm building quite slow," or did you ever feel like you were building muscle quite slow, or your physique was developing too slowly, or did you feel like you kind of always had a temperament or a very real expectation that, it's gonna be a slow process and I'm in it for the slow process?
I think at the beginning, you are always still expecting some of those newer gains. Again, you're like, "Okay, I'm coming out of my season," or whatever it is. It's like, "Oh, I'm gonna change up my training cycle," what have you, and it's you expect some of those rapid sort of results. Yeah, so earlier on, for sure, you're way more erratic. You're just learning, right? You're learning, and this was before social media, and the information wasn't as actually as readily available. So you either had to go and hunt for it or look up bodybuilding.com posts or what have you, right? um but as you sort of, especially now being a coach as well, right? Like, you take this sort of bigger picture view over the whole thing, and that comes with experience and time, right? So, and you can't tell any 21-year-old that, because all they see is, what's coming up on the social media feed, right? And it's like, well, this guy's 19 and look, he's jacked. And I even say that, and I'm like, wow, it's impressive. So, social media is a double-edged sword, right? Like, it kind of expedites it's expedited a lot of things, right? You've got younger people who are stronger, fitter, faster, more muscular than ever, right? And because they're exposed to it now, right? And there is almost no limitations out there in a way, but it is a double-edged sword, because then that's the expectation as well. So it's kind of like trying to reframe some things and taking a bit more of this sort of, I like big picture view sort of idea, right? Where it's like, okay, as long as I'm consistently improving, I'm going to become my best, whatever that may be.
What do you say to someone? Like, what do you say to the 21-year-old, 22-year-old, 25-year-old even that's kind of in the maybe in the early stages of their natural bodybuilding journey or their lifting journey, do you just kind of, and they're finding that they are
Mm,
frustrated from
yeah.
seeing all of this external information where they are developing these unrealistic expectations? What would you say to them? Would you kind of do your best to explain what you just shared, or do you have
Mhm.
a way of like painting a picture for someone that's maybe who's listening right now that's feeling this? What do you think that you would say to them?
Yeah, I first of all encourage them that they are doing a great job, right? And focusing on what they can control, right? Which is going to the gym. It's, eating your meals. It's doing all the things that makes anyone sort of successful. And then I try and give them examples as well, right? Like even for myself, the 2024 every season before my 2021 season, I always weighed 140 pounds, right? And you can go back and look at pictures, and I was shredded. All the like in competition, I was the shredder, right? So um but it took me about 10 years of competing to actually finally put on a significant amount of stage weight, right? And it happened between this period of years, like, competition seasons, years 7 through, I think it was 10 or 11 or whatever of, years competing, right? So, and I always take a few years off in the off season. You know, you sometimes when speaking to someone of that age, you also have to dissect what they're currently doing, right? Like, as you get longer in this sport, it's good to take a couple of years off and grow and stuff like that. So, you got some young, excited athlete who just wants to compete continuously. It's like, oh, give yourself a break, live a little, right? Grow, right? Like, so you're trying to see that big picture again, explain it to them, and just keep them going, because that's the other thing as well. Especially, we on the natural side of the sport, we want to keep people on the natural side of the sport, because it is easy to be influenced by the wrong person, right? And whether that's on social media or a coach or what have you. So
Right. That's really good advice. I have more questions about that in particular. But before we kind of segue and talk more about, I think it'd be awesome to talk more about the work that you do promoting natural
mm,
bodybuilding in the WNBF and keeping people excited and staying on the path of natural bodybuilding, maybe instead of the
mm,
other path, the enhanced path. But before that, I'm really curious. It's cool to get to talk to such a high level competitor about some of the things that you have struggled with in particular, maybe in particular when you are prepping. So you mentioned like
mm,
you kind of consistently come to the stage shredded. It took you at the same time about 10 years to really see a huge significant change to put on some like really notable size, even though you would have been building the entire time. But I guess to really kind of put this question to a focal point, when you prep, what do
mhm,
you find to be the most significant challenges? Whether that be like, "Hey, I've got high food drive, like I really gotta keep my food drive at a good
mhm,
place." Do you find that it's like lethargy? Do you find like it's a mindset thing? Do you find that like it's travel for competitions that stresses you out, or like balancing time with your family and making
mhm.
prep work and with that kind of structure? Or what do you find are like, okay, I'm prepping. These are the things I really need to remember. These are the things that I struggle with. I wanted to quickly interrupt this episode to let you know about the work that I do. I work full time as an online physique coach, helping my clients to accomplish their muscle growth and fat loss goals by optimizing their approach to strength training and nutrition. I've been doing this work since 2018 and love helping my clients to transform their bodies and ultimately their lives. If you've been considering getting some help with accomplishing your own physique goals, you're invited to hit the link in the description below to learn a little bit more about the work that I do and how I can help you. You can even use that link to schedule a free video consultation with me. If you have any questions about my coaching or how I can help you, just email me at sam@jadeathletics.ca. All right, let's get back to the episode.
Yeah, I think initially, especially the first few seasons, I dieted way too hard. Like calories were way too low considering my kind of metabolic rate and training volume intensity and everything else. So, and that in turn led to, very food focused, the typical sort of bodybuilding, prep feels, right? And That could be sort of a disorder in itself. So definitely, and I don't know if it was a nature of, what came first, the chicken or the egg. Like right now, preps are relatively easy. Like they're pretty straightforward. I keep my food just at the level I need just to be in a small caloric deficit. I don't do any cardio. I, just do my training, and my performance is super high. But also, at the same time, I have to travel because of nature of what we do, right? We promote shows, we judge shows all over North America, and all over the world, really. So we're involved in a lot of different areas and aspects in the sport, that involves our time and presence elsewhere. That sort of taking this approach now, allows us to do that and still stay level-headed, functioning, and be able to focus, and while still dieting on prep and everything else, right? So, and I don't know what kind of, is it the mindset that helps with the travel, or is it actually that travel that kind of forced the mindset? And I'm not entirely sure about the answer of that one, but whatever it is, the last, I'd say since 2021 season has been an absolute game changer for sure. And I think that season in particular, that was the year. It was COVID as well, so kind of this made things a little easier. But I had the goal of competing on the world stage without telling anyone I was competing, right? And as you know, as any sort of dieting bodybuilder, you get a little loopy sometimes. You forget some of the things you're saying, all of that sort of stuff. So, my goal was to you basically do it without anyone asking if I was competing, and I did. I showed up at Worlds with, took a photo with my tan on or whatever, and just everyone went crazy, which was fun. It was a lot of fun, but I kind of, that also, it reinforced you're able to be a human and still compete and prep, right? So, but yeah, physiology is physiology. You're still going to be dieting to inhumane levels of body fat, and there is a little bit of give. So I'm not saying it's easy by any means. It's just that you find the sweet spot where it's manageable. Yeah, and especially we've got two kids, married, and businesses, and a whole bunch of other things where I do have to sort of maintain sort of a functioning human being.
I think that's all really helpful to hear, especially knowing that you are so busy and that you do have so many responsibilities that you make it all work. You come to that level of conditioning and just muscularity when you get to the stage, and you do all make it work. And I think it's cool that you mentioned that, like, it's in the past couple times, it's almost been easy
Mhm.
upon keeping the food at an appropriate level. I really get that you mentioned, like, we kind of get loopy where you almost forget what you're saying sometimes. I know that, like, I've been in awkward conversations where someone asks me a question, I answer for like a minute, and then I can't remember what they just asked me or what I'm saying or where I am. Shoot. Um, but yeah, I definitely get that. So throughout this journey of building and prepping and competing, where did King's Fitness come into play? So your gym, were you already working in the fitness industry, like in your early 20s, or did you get
Mhm.
into working in fitness as a career after winning your pro status, or what is the general timeline as far
Yeah,
as starting your gym goes?
it's a good question. So I started working in gyms when I was about 18, just as part-time jobs and stuff like that, right? Front desk sort of stuff, and whatever. Um, then I came out to Canada, moved, went to university. That's when I was actually competing. So I was, the last 2, 3 years of university, couple 2 or 3 years of university was kind of, I was actively competing for sure. So doing that whilst working, and going to school and all of that stuff. And then I did get my pro card, and I did start to help more and more people out with just general sort of, program designs and talking about nutrition and some things like that, as I was sort of really going down the rabbit hole of just learning, right? YouTube was around then. 3D Muscle Journey were just starting to put out a lot of their stuff, and I just really related with their style. Actually, I'm going to preface that beforehand. I actually worked with Dr. Joe Klimczewski. I met him at a prep camp in between my first two seasons, and yeah, I remember reading his articles and stuff like that, and it just made a lot of sense with what they were talking about, and this flexible approach to dieting and not cutting water during your peak week and stuff like that. And I had firsthand experience then working with Joe in a competition season itself. So I started to talk to others about it, started programming, started doing the old online coaching thing, at the same time getting my sort of personal training certifications. I then finished university, went to work in a gym and doing a little bit more work consulting on that side of things as my coaching business started to grow. And I got to this fork in the road, right, where it was like, okay, I could keep it as a side gig, or I always wanted my own place to train, and I didn't know exactly what that looked like or meant, right? Some people have these grand visions of gyms and stuff like that, but I just wanted my own place to train, to be honest with you. So I quit that sort of wellness consulting, personal training kind of job out of university, and opened up my first little facility. King's Fitness was already established as an online coaching brand, so at least I knew I could support myself and girlfriend at the time. And then from there, it was just a real slow snowball effect. From there, we moved into a bigger location. 2 years later, moved into an even bigger location. And then from there, we've got actually three and a half gyms, the half being a private training studio as well. So yeah, and it started in 2015. So this is actually 10 years to the day that we opened up gym number one. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. I know we were talking a little bit off air about the newest gym that's opened up, and
Mhm.
you've been sharing about it on social media, and it's all looks incredible. I'm wondering when to summarize in my words, you at the time of competing, you slowly kind of got into coaching other people, helping
Mhm.
other people with their training, nutrition. That started to snowball. It sounds like it became a little bit more of a formal kind of a career path. You started to grow in that. And then you shifted to this prospect of having your own place to train at, better than a garage gym, but also like something that could go in alignment with your career, which was starting the King Fitness. And it's grown since then. I guess what I'm wondering is when you initially got started with the first gym, what did that look like? Like, did you have a background as far as your entrepreneurial background or business background? What did it look like as far as the learning process goes of like, I need to rent or buy or lease a building. I maybe need to get a loan
Mhm.
from a bank, or like I need to learn how to get different pieces of a gym equipment or to like eventually hire staff. Like, what did that look like? Did you have a background with this? Did you have like someone mentoring you, or was it just like, I'm just going to research it and go like,
Yeah.
dive in head
Just
first?
just dive in head first. Yeah. It was literally like that. I kind of I self-funded it. I sold my Jeep and
Wow.
started with that. And
Holy
it
crap.
was very much a learn as you do sort of thing. But it to me it just made sense, right? And I knew it would grow, and like I said, I knew I could support myself with my at least coaching side of things, to at least keep the doors open and stuff like that. So it was an absolute risk, but it was kind of like those early days. It was a lot of just self-education and learning and speaking to, making connections and networking and stuff like that, right? And meeting some other gym owners and just being like, hey, just like this, just go and ask questions, right? Like I remember doing a lot of that in the early days, a lot of local, independent gym owners sort of thing that were very generous with being able to, answer my questions at least. And then, yeah, it just went from there. And then in time, I got more mentors and hired coaches and stuff like that. Just like most athletes these days will hire a coach for their expertise and their knowledge to get them to the stage. It's very similar, right?
Yeah. That's really cool. You traded a Jeep
Yeah.
for a gym. It
I
sounds
don't
like
know
a
if
good,
I've never actually said that online before. So
it sounds like a worthy trade from my
it
perspective.
was a good investment long run.
Totally can imagine that. Um, Something that you did mention is like and acknowledge that like there is a risk in doing something like that. I'm wondering, like with your personality, your temperament, or the way that you think about things, like was that something that did you ever have seasons where like you're really worried, like what happens if, you know, like things don't go the way that I plan? Like, did that ever kind of bog you down, that kind of worry or anxiety? Or do you find that you have like a temperament that's like, I've got the risk, but at the end of the day, like it's going to work out how it works out? What is your
Yeah,
kind of approach on that?
yeah, I try and, risk mitigation is number one, right? Like I said, it was a small little garage sort of style gym, right? Like, it wasn't ever going to end us in a way, right? Like, it was a small investment up front. It was every time we made a bit of money, we just reinvested back into the facility, right? Like we got, you know, a, a piece of equipment. A used piece of equipment, right? It was, a relatively small investment over and over again, right? And a lot of early stage reinvestment into the place. And then eventually you got to that point where okay, now we can upgrade. We got the cash flow to do that, right? But we didn't upgrade 10x. No, we upgrade by 50% or whatever, right? And then it was like, okay, now we're at the point where it's like, okay, now we can move into the space, which actually makes sense for a gym size. We've got some extra trainers working with us, and membership starting growing up. My personal training business is growing up, blowing up, and stuff like that. So it was like we never did anything until it made sense, right? So it basically risk management 101, right? Like we didn't come in and be like, I want this grand facility with marble countertops and all the latest, craziest, expensive, machines and everything else, right? And which is flashy and great. However, you don't have a proof of concept, right? And that goes with anything, right? Like you need a proof of concept and it needs to make sense for a business to, in my opinion, have that foundation to grow versus just being like, okay, this looks really good, but does it make sense in real life, right? So
It's funny because that makes perfect logical sense, but, like, I mean, for my own personality, when thinking about not, like, owning a gym per se, but, like, accomplishing some kind of a goal, sometimes I skip all those steps, and I
mhm.
think immediately about, like, I want a spa gym, like, I'm gonna start with an Equinox right away or some high-level bodybuilding or powerlifting gym, and it's like, no, just, think about the logistical steps, start small, reinvest, slowly grow from there. So that really makes a lot of sense. It's just it's logic, I suppose.
Yeah, and
Um
again, I think again, I'm not a huge risk taker. Although if you look at everything we've done, everyone would be like, yes, absolute risk taker, 100%. But when you actually break it down and say, this has been 10 years of just 20%, 20%, whatever it is, right?
yeah.
Like small number compounded over time leads to big results, right? So, and that's been the same philosophy with our, even the bodybuilding federation and stuff like that. We haven't had the goal of, going to 100 shows. It's just like, no, let's just add one a year, right? Like a proof of concept, it works. Okay, now let's add another city, whatever, right? Like, whatever that sort of goal is. But
Yeah. Oh, that's it makes so much sense. It makes sense even with natural bodybuilding itself
mhm,
too, right? It's like, we want to perform better from one show to the next. We
mhm,
want to keep working on our physique. And it's like, well, 1 year to the next, we're only adding on like a certain percent. We're not going from, day one as an untrained person to being like top 5 at worlds the next year. There's all these years in between of that kind of incremental growth. So it makes a lot of sense. I guess where it's tough is like you see this picture. So like when it comes to where you are now with your gyms, it's like you noted, some people would look at the gyms and think, wow,
mhm,
that must have been a huge risk, but you don't initially see the history, the background, which is 10 plus years of reinvesting into
mhm.
the business and the business and small steps like that. So I think that's really, really helpful to hear. It's helpful for me to hear anyways.
I hope
Um,
someone else gets some value.
um, Maybe this would be cool to segue into the work that you do with the WNBF and the
Mhm,
shows that you just mentioned. So you work pretty in depth with the WNBF. You're a show promoter. I initially
mhm,
thought that you just promoted one show, the WNBF Calgary, which I competed at as an amateur. It's the Calgary Pro Am, and it was. I mean, it was amazing. It was a really awesome experience of all the different shows that I've done. It was definitely one of my favorite experiences. So I know I knew you promoted that one, but you also promote the upcoming East Coast Naturals in
mhm.
Halifax, I think. Is that right?
St.
Halifax,
John's.
St. John's. Darn.
Newfoundland. Yeah, yeah,
Sometimes I get mixed up with the East Coast cities. I'm a West Coaster, so shame on me. Um, I think also Saskatchewan WNBF. Is that right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Is it those three?
Ontario as well now. We did take that over just because the local promoter it was just busy with life and
Right.
coaching very successful on that side of things. And it made sense for us to take the reins back on that one. And then we do promote the Vancouver show. Now we have a
Wow.
mutual friend who I believe Adrian, he's our local promoter out there. He does a lot of our sort of legwork and connecting with coaches and stuff like that. But then in Kelowna, yeah, we have Kyle and Kristen, and then in Edmonton we have Jackie and Toby, and then we have, like I said, local promoter in Saskatchewan as well. Just having eyes on the area, they know the lay of the land and stuff like that. And key with any sort of business or anything in life is having an amazing team around you, right? So surrounding yourself with like-minded individuals, right? We've all come from athletic or we all came from competitive backgrounds in bodybuilding, which is how we kind of met each other. And they liked what we were doing with the sport and the federation and the natural movement, so to speak. They're like, hey, can we promote a show in our region? And absolutely. So yeah, we talk about sort of there's creating a playbook and guiding and mentoring and all of those sort of things, and that's what we've been doing with all of our promoters as well.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
so we have
Well,
seven shows in Canada and 8 next year. So yeah,
that's incredible. Well, I'm curious about a couple things. So for you personally, I'm wondering like how did you initially,
I'm going to backtrack just a little bit because I
of
missed
course.
Winnipeg, because we have a promoter out there, Dino. He's been competing for years and within the WNBF as well. And he's doing a really good job out there, and also a competitive power lifter as well. So we're all very like-minded individuals, and, we each have our own region that we're taking care of.
I feel like we're really lucky in Canada because basically in any part, if you live in any part of Canada, there's shows that are likely going to be at least relatively close to you that you can travel to. And you look at the US, they've got a lot of WNBF shows and
Mhm.
INBF shows. Um, but I mean, we've got like what, a tenth of the US population, and
Mhm.
we've got such high level shows. So I feel like we are really lucky to have such great access to shows as natural bodybuilders. And I think it'd be one of the things that I want to touch on and maybe talk a little bit more on is like developing the awareness of these shows because they're so awesome. I'm saying that, of course, as a competitor, as someone who loves competing in these things. But before we get there, I'm wondering how you personally became involved as a show promoter, as you became not involved, not just
Mhm.
as a competitor, but you became involved in the organization. So that's the first part of my question. The second part of my question is what exactly does the work of show promoter entail? What do you do? We can
Mhm.
go from there, I
Yes.
suppose.
Okay. So I think natural bodybuilding and training in general has done a lot for me personally growing up. Overcome a lot of things and stuff like that, and it allowed me to just really direct my focus to, and so I say it kind of saved my life in a way. Just going down, could have gone down so many dark and different pathways. It really kind of allowed me just to focus on myself, um, and which led to the stage and everything else. So it was my way initially was to give back to the sport. So like I said, in between my two first season, which was with a different natural federation, the reason why I ended up picking the WINBF WNBF at the time was because I just believed in their values, their drug testing measures, and their ability to be a worldwide presence in natural bodybuilding. So, and this was before there was new ownership in the WNBF in 2014, that's really expedited their growth worldwide. Now we're in over 65 countries, but before that, it was I got my pro card, so I was asked if I wanted to show promote. A position came up, and it was purely by that network that we'd kind of spoken a little bit about earlier. So it was kind of an opportunity came up, and I've always been like, even if something scared me, I've always been like, yes, because I could always see the outcome before it sort of happened. And so I was like, absolutely, yes, like count me in. So I did promote my first show in Calgary in 2013. So I was the regional director until 2016. So we promoted I guess it would have been 4 shows annually. And then my fiance and I at the time got the offer to actually take over the federation. And before that, actually, I had started judging down in mostly Seattle region. I'd made some good connections and friends down there, and they're like, "Hey, do you want to come and judge at our shows?" And so, yes, said yes without even questioning it. And then um, came back later in 2016. We got offered to actually acquire the federation itself, and at the time, it had 3 cities: Vancouver, Edmonton, Calgary. And yeah, we took that opportunity. And so the first year or two was a lot of like dissecting the business and making connections and everything else before implementing it in a way that we wanted to. Like I said, we're both athletes. We've got a ton of experience competing all over North America at the time, starting to judge different shows. I'd even judged at the Philippines now at that point. So again, now getting a little bit more international presence, we were starting to see, okay, what do we want as athletes? But what do we want our athletes to experience? So our number one goal with the whole federation is an athlete experience, right? And if we know that if there is a great athlete experience, the shows will grow, which will bring more competitive athletes, which will snowball over time into the biggest actually drug tested natural bodybuilding federation in Canada or the world, right? So that's we've always come from it as that is does it improve the experience of the show? And if it does, then we're going to implement it. So we changed a lot of processes. We basically flipped everything upside down and started again and ideally I'd like to think that we've done pretty well with our shows. You said you really enjoyed the Calgary show. You competed in Ontario, I know as well, and have competed in elsewhere in other sort of federations as well. So that was sort of our goal. And again, it comes back to our core values. And if you can stick to that, good things are only going to come.
Yeah. That that's amazing. And yeah, I can speak from my own experience that I've had a great experience at every WNBF Canada show that I've competed at. That's for sure. And that makes a lot of sense. You keep the athlete experience as high quality as you can possibly keep it. It attracts more athletes, so it grows the sport. In that sense, more
Mhm.
people are signing up to compete. What do you think, and it makes sense too about your kind of like incremental growth concept of, you invest in maybe just one more show per year, for example, or you get in more competitors at the shows that are running each year, and slowly this kind of slow growth kind of concept, which is, the concept works. It absolutely works. My question, I suppose, is, do you have you thought, I'm what is your take on not just growing natural bodybuilding from the perspective of attracting more competitors, but more spectators? So, for example, I could be off on this, but I think I'm right. The Probably the most popular bodybuilding federation in the world is probably the IFBB, an enhanced
Mhm.
uh, an enhanced federation. It's not just the athletes that are attracted to that federation, it's also like they get a lot of people coming to many of their shows, not all of their shows, I'm sure, but a lot of the pro level shows, there's more people going, I suspect. I haven't actually looked at any numbers, but that's my suspicion. And I'm wondering if, like, what do you think it would take, or maybe I don't know if it's possible, but what do you think it would take to get more spectators interested in the sport, in addition to athletes? And also, do you think there's anything that, like, I don't know, someone that's really passionate about natural bodybuilding, a competitor, can do to get more people interested, to grow the interest of the sport, that's not just a competitor, starting with like maybe their family and friends? I think that's probably where it would start, right? Like, hey,
Mhm.
come and
Yeah.
see me compete. But what do you think could be done to grow the popularity of the sport from a spectator standpoint? If there is anything, I'm not sure. Maybe it is this slow growth process, kind of a thing where, I don't know.
I think,
What is your take on that?
yeah, it's kind of like we're still in this niche industry in the whole sport, right? Natural bodybuilding.
Yeah.
Um, we, I mean, for sure, the IFBB has been around forever, right? They've been around forever. They get all the funding, the supplement companies, the sponsorships, and stuff like that, and that in essence turns into more viewership, more spectators, more athletes, and everything else. But again, it's coming back to core values and being like, okay, are we supporting? We going. They got. I get the attraction. People going there because it's freaky, right? Like it's they're big. They're on things, and that's enhancing their physiques, and they are freakier than the average normal, even genetic elite natural bodybuilder, right? So I think that's where the money is, and so they can sort of potentially bring things in to make it a better user experience. But some of the things that we've done, um we moved to this live judging format, which streamlined the process for a lot of the athletes, right? And like I said, athlete experience is number one. But not only that, because the athletes are now only focused on a shorter period of time on the stage, guess what? The audience are now only coming for a couple hours at a time, instead of being like the old school way of, I'm going to be there for 6 hours pre-judging, have a 4 hour break, and I'm going to come back for the same show in the evening, just with more lights for 6 hours, right? And the audience is exhausted, the athletes are exhausted and stuff like that. So a lot of it comes down to that experience. But with this slow sort of growth, adding more athletes, getting more recognition, um, being able to get a little bit more sponsorships in, and creating a little bit more like these expo sort of ideas and stuff like that. And that's something that I'd really like to push a little bit more further, is having sort of these a ton of sponsor booths, and making a little bit of an expo around it, maybe even combining it with some other sports, powerlifting, Olympic lifting. I'm competitive in powerlifting as well. I promote powerlifting events. We don't have to go down that rabbit hole, but we do some other things in different disciplines, and maybe even bringing sort of like these mini natural Arnold classics together as well, right? So there's a lot of things there on the user side, on the athlete side themselves. you know Social media is huge, right? Like it's sticking to your core values. Don't go and say one thing and do another, right? Like don't go and repost a ton of stuff of a whole bunch of IFBB pros, when you're morally, at least, staying on the natural side of things, right? We can support those that we want to aspire to, right? And I think that will help spread the word, and the knowledge and the awareness of just even the sport in general, right? So
Definitely. It would almost be like a dissonant way of thinking if, you're like, I'm a natural bodybuilding competitor, but like
mhm,
these are the physiques that I really aspire to,
yeah.
all the natural or the enhanced competitors. So that makes a lot of sense. Like that concept of like a fitness expo, or like a kind of like how they do the Olympia, like a huge
Mhm.
expo around the competition itself, is like, that's a sweet idea. I mean, it's kind of already there are already booths for natural
Yeah.
bodybuilding competitions, the WNBF competitions, but like that growing to become like even a bigger event. That's cool. I know that that's like how I would like to spend my weekend for sure, whether I'm
Yeah, it
competing
makes
or
it
not.
makes it more fun, and like I said, how do we get more people into the audience and spectators and stuff like that? It's being attracted by other things, and not just, okay, I'm going to watch my buddy compete on stage, right? But it's like, okay, what else can I do when they're not on stage, or what will attract other people to the sport and see maybe this thing if they don't even know anyone competing, right? Like
Right.
obviously, great physiques will do that, but at the same time, I think it's got to be a bit more maybe holistic.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. I'm just thinking out loud, in that there's almost a level of irony, right? We're talking about like spectators having the desire to see like the freaks and the enhanced world, the FBB world, and the reason that there's a level of irony of that level of popularity, maybe at least for now, over
Mhm.
natural bodybuilding is, I mean, I think that there's not the same level of awareness just how much you can accomplish naturally. So like you look at the top levels of natural competitors nowadays, or even within the last 20 years, like Brian Whitaker, you mentioned earlier, and yourself, like if
Mhm.
people saw photos of you on stage, they'd be like, this,
Mhm.
like this is absolutely the ideal, or anyone that competes on the world stage or any pro stage or even the top level amateurs, they look at that, and that's, it's like that's the ideal that a lot of people probably have, and it's almost like they don't know that. I think maybe I'm over speculating, but I'm just kind of thinking out loud here. There's not really a question and all that, but I guess my hope is too that more awareness does grow and the popularity grows. And yeah, so
And
I
and
do.
just say kudos
Yep.
to you for doing these sort of podcasts. And like I said, I think one of the goals is to spread the natural bodybuilding awareness, right? And it comes back to things like this. It's getting on podcasts, and this is why I respect a lot of the. I'm going to throw out names again, but the 3D Muscle Journey guys, Alberto Nunez, Jeff Alberts, Eric Helms in particular. Is their willingness just to openly share, right? And I'm always as super transparent, and again, I think that helps because it makes you more relatable to most people, right? And you look at all of those guys' careers over time. They started off, they even post about it, right? Like, these are the mistakes I made 30 years ago, but I've been competing for 30 years straight. So it's great. And so it's surrounding yourself, it's following, it's being around these like-minded people who have maybe you want to see yourself being like in the future, right? So
That's so true. I can speak on that too. Like even the specifics of the 3D MJ guy, something that's always been very attractive to me, that's attracted me to the sport, is athletes like that and coaches that are involved with natural bodybuilding that do show that level of relatability of sharing, like, hey, I've struggled with this and that it's normal, but you can still overcome it. And this is what I've accomplished from overcoming it. And this is what your potential could be, not for everyone, but like you can reach a great potential for yourself. And I, I, that's something that's very attractive to me for getting into like opening up this natural bodybuilding world, at least in some sense. So, um, yeah, I want to ask you, while we got some time left, about the judging work that you do in the WNBF as well. So, something that you noted, you promote at least 5 shows that I know now. I thought it was 3, but now we know it's 5 at least. And in addition to that, I suppose you're also the head of the WNBF Canada Federation, as you noted too,
yeah.
and you also judge shows. So, for any competitor, prospective competitor that's listening, or current competitor that's going to get on stage in the near future, in the next year or two, what can you kind of outline how bodybuilding is scored and judged? Considering I think some people don't have a full understanding of that. I've heard it critiqued, and I think you've probably heard this criticism of natural bodybuilding, which I don't think is actually true at a lot of levels, which is bodybuilding is super subjective. It's like you don't know if you're going to win because it's so subjective. But I don't think that's entirely true. I think that there is a pretty detailed process of judging. It's not perfect from my understanding. There is a level of subjectivity, but overall there is a process and it is quite objective. And I'm wondering if you can kind of elaborate on that and give those who are listening an idea of how they will be judged on stage upon getting on stage.
Yeah, so depending on the classes and stuff like that, but typically you're judged in 2 rounds, right? So there's typically a symmetry round, which is kind of overall balance, proportion, conditioning. Are is the physique like the ideals that we're trying to judge them against, right? So like you said, there is an objective component. However, there is also 7 judges, and we are trying to hold everyone to a standard, but there is some individuality differences in there. But it all pans out to be very, very consistent. And then typically round 2 is kind of on the muscularity round, which is called different things, whether it's muscle tone. As you kind of go through the classes from bodybuilding to more sort of men's physique and bikini, presentation is a little bit more heavily weighted, but that's kind of in that round 2 portion, right? So, yeah, so I mean, judged, it's a bodybuilding show, so we say you're judged on the physique first. So with every competitor, that's what they should focus on as a primary first. So you need to get in shape. You need to have, as relatively speaking, as much muscle as the criteria allows, and be as lean as you can be for what the criteria allows, right? And then you start working on the smaller things, the presentation, the posing, the walk, making sure the tanning's good, the hair and makeup, and all of those sort of things. But those sort of things are more like tiebreakers, right? If you've got a really solid physique first, you're going to be a top contender, right? If your posing is off and your presentation is off, maybe you play second or third, but you're not going from first to last with a great physique, right? So that's typically the way I like to kind of explain it to people is, right, focus on what you can control, mostly with the training, the nutrition, the dieting, and all of that stuff. Work with a coach to do all that. And then start layering in the other things. And a lot of the other things, that comes with experience and time as well, right? Like, and practice, obviously. But I didn't really get comfortable posing until I've been competing for 10 years. So it's like it was always a bit more of an afterthought for me, to be honest with you. I loved the training, the dieting was, part of the process. And the posing was a little bit more of an afterthought. But competing 10 years, now I actually start enjoying that part, right? And that's where the real, say, fun begins. So but yeah, I'd say that that's pretty much the pose, the judging breakdown in a way. Like I said, there's 7 judges. There's a head judge. The head judge is there to direct the flow of the show. They aren't there to judge and score. They're there to position the athletes. Within bodybuilding, you remove a high and low score. So again, now you're getting that median, average, best, accurate score, right? So yeah. Was there anything else that you specifically wanted to cover? Was that an overview? Good
That was
overview.
I think that was a great overview. And actually it gives me a little bit of peace of mind to know that it took you about 10 years before you really felt comfortable with the posing, because I am still working on that myself. I have never quite felt like it's been in the pocket, that's for sure. And maybe it never will, but yeah, it gives me at least a peace of mind, some
Mhm.
peace of mind of, uh, maybe personally I've still, it's okay that I've still got room to grow. But no, that is all really, really helpful. I guess one last quick question on that I think a lot of people wonder about is, especially for like open bodybuilding and classic physique now in
Mhm.
the
Mhm. Yep.
WNBF, and even for the stage walk, I suppose, for the men's physique athletes, and the women's divisions too, like bikini. That's not judged from my understanding.
Yeah.
It's
Right. So
for Yes, I'm wondering if you can speak on that. Like, if it's not judged, but we're doing it in front of the judges, there's got to be something that's taken
mhm.
into account with the posing routine, or is there really like it's not judged at all? Like, are the
Sure.
judges
So
looking with the judges are like, I'm not looking at this, or like, what's that?
yeah. So the posing routine is the scoring is already done. I'm going to start with bodybuilding, right? Again, there's differences for the classes. I'll quickly explain a lot of them, but yeah, bodybuilding, the routine is done after the judging, right? You've got your pre-judging rounds, your quarter turns, your muscularities. However, you can still see athletes posing. Obviously, they're posing when they're on stage, right? So even though it's not in a routine, you are still taking that into consideration on how someone's displaying their physique, right? Um, so, like I said, though, that may break a place or two at the very tops, but it's not going to drop someone with a great physique from top to bottom. Okay. Then you get into classic. Now, this is new for the WNBF because we've kind of said for a long, long time that natural bodybuilding is classic. However, there is a demand in the industry, and rightly so. I think it was a good incorporation. And this is for WNBF's first year of actually fully incorporating classic. But now the criteria changes a little bit. So now you've got your symmetry round, but then the muscularity round is now split into 2 components where it's more heavily weighted into posing and presentation, right? So how someone flowing between poses, and do they look very aesthetic on stage within the whilst they are posing and stuff like that, right? So we like to use the words flow and grace and those kind of ideas, right? So it is a little bit more heavily weighted, but again, their posing routine is after the judging round, so it's not technically judged with regards to their placings. But then when you get into the men's physique, because the walks and stuff like that, they are all in the judging round. So men's physique, bikini, figure, and even like fit body to an extent, they that is encompassing the presentation portion of their judging criteria. So um, we want them to obviously have a great physique on stage, but also to be able to present that physique as well. So
Right. That's all super,
mhm.
super helpful. That's also really helpful about distinguishing some of the differences between classic physique and open bodybuilding, with classic physique being so new. I know that there's a lot
Mhm.
of like crossover competitors
Yeah.
now that are kind of trying to figure out what do I compete in, or they're trying to, you know,
And
play their
It's
hand at winning
very
at both or either one. So
totally
it's like helpful to know that they are judged differently. It's more than just the attire is a little bit different and like the posing rounds are a little bit different. Like the poses are a little bit different. Um,
from the judging perspective as well. You can really quickly it really quickly shines through who is meant for classic and who is meant for bodybuilding. So it's I was a
Interesting.
little concerned about that because again the physiques aren't overly different. We're not looking for a necessarily smaller or less lean classic physique athlete. No, we're looking for someone who's still muscular, still lean and conditioned, but it's all about that grace on stage. And we find that there's a lot of very high level bodybuilders who look great and they even pose really well when they're in the poses, but they don't have that grace and flow that some of the really good classic physique athletes have. So, and this is good. It's an interesting time because this is where we want the athletes to try their hand in both so that they can get the feedback and be like, hey, I'm meant to be a little bit more here or there, right? So,
Right. That's all really, really helpful to know. I know from my own personal perspective, like I've thought about with the introduction of the new category, like, should I consider this and what are the differences? So this is helpful, I think, not just for those who are listening that are on the fence or wondering about the differences, but it's actually helpful for me to hear too. But yeah, anyways, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for spending some time with me. I've personally learned a ton. I think that this has been really it's been really cool to get to hear about your journey with with your own personal bodybuilding journey, starting King Fitness, a little bit about coaching your clients, the work that you've done with the WNBF and the judging. I think this has been amazing. So thank you so much, Leo. And I'm wondering if someone were to be interested in working with you as a coach, as you are also a prep coach and not just a prep coach, but a lifestyle body or a lifestyle physique coach. If someone's interested in working with you or learning more about King Fitness, if they're local to the area of one of your gyms, or if they want to get to, if they're thinking about learning more about competing in the WNBF, what are some of the best places to learn more about you or the WNBF or one of your gyms?
yeah, I think Instagram's usually the easiest way. Leo.kingsfitness is my personal page. Kings.fitness is our gym page. But anywhere at the WNBF Canada Instagram pages works as well. So that's usually the best way to get a hold of us, and you'll be directed to me or it'll be me personally. And I'm happy to answer any questions about anything. Like I said, I'm super transparent. I'm just here for guidance for a lot of people, right? And yeah, just happy to help out. And obviously, we just want to keep growing. The sport of natural bodybuilding, and just in general, just helping people out in a healthy way, right? So whether that's competing or whether it's personal training or lifestyle coaching or getting to the stage, but it can be done in a more natural, healthy way.
Sweet. Awesome. Well, I'm going to include your links just below. So for anyone who's interested, make sure to check the description below. Check Leo's Instagram. Thank you again so much. This has been awesome. And I'm really grateful to get to steal some of your time.
Yeah. Thank you, Sam. Appreciate it.